I suspected my wife was planning a divorce, so I moved my assets. 2 weeks later. This story is very meaningful. Everyone should hear it. Listen to Brian tell the story. I always thought I was a rational man, someone who didn't jump to conclusions, who believed in logic over paranoia. I never imagined I'd be sitting here, telling this story, looking back at the past 6 years of my life, like it was some elaborate trap I had willingly walked into. But life has a way of shocking you. And betrayal? It always cuts deeper when it comes from the person you trust the most. I never thought I'd be the type of man to suspect my own wife of planning a divorce behind my back. I never thought I'd be the type to move my assets in secret, to sit quietly while she planned to gut me financially. But 2 weeks after I took precautions, she sat me down on the couch, turned off the TV, and said the words I knew were coming. We need to talk. I think we should get a divorce. She said it so calmly, so prepared. It wasn't emotional, not even angry. It was businesslike, rehearsed, like she had been waiting for this moment, like she had already won. I looked at her and felt nothing, because I had already seen this coming. I had already heard the hushed phone calls, seen the sudden distance between us, caught the way she had been trying to get her hands on our financial documents. And more importantly, I had already done what needed to be done. So I just nodded and said, "If that's how you feel, we should figure out the next steps." She blinked, thrown off by my lack of reaction. I could see it in her eyes. She expected resistance. She expected me to beg, to argue, to try and fix things. But I didn't, because I already knew who she really was. 3 days later, the divorce papers arrived. It wasn't just a breakup, it was an execution. She wanted half the house, half the savings, half the investments. She wanted the car. She wanted alimony. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, like she had spent months crafting the perfect plan to strip me of everything I had built. But what she didn't know was that I had beaten her to it. I had already moved everything. The house, legally transferred to my mother's name. The savings, tucked safely in an account she couldn't touch. My investments, locked down so tightly she wouldn't see a cent. When she and her lawyer walked into mediation, they were ready to take everything. What they didn't expect was the stack of documents my lawyer handed across the table. "This is going to be a lot harder than you thought." Her face drained of color as she flipped through the papers, her expression twisting in shock. She turned to me, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You knew." I didn't say anything. I just watched as the realization settled in. She had played a game, and she had lost. 6 months earlier, if you had told me my wife was capable of this, I would have laughed. I met him, let's call her that, 6 years ago. She was charming, funny, intelligent. We had the kind of relationship people envied, the kind of love that felt effortless. I never had a single reason to doubt her, not once. We had our routines. She worked in marketing, I worked in finance. We had our ups and downs, sure, but nothing that ever made me think our marriage was in trouble. Then something changed. It started small. She was on her phone more than usual. At first, I brushed it off. Work emails, social media, nothing out of the ordinary. But then one night, I joked about how attached she had become to her phone. "Running a secret spy ring now?" She laughed, but it was different. Forced. "No, work's been emailing me a lot." It was a simple answer, and I had no reason not to believe her. But a few days later, I noticed she had put a password on her phone. She had never done that before. When I asked about it, she shrugged. "Just security stuff. Hackers, you know." It was a reasonable answer. Logical, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Then she started taking calls in another room. That was new. Before, if she got a call, she'd answer it right there on the couch. On speaker sometimes, not caring if I was in the room. Now, the moment her phone rang, she'd get up. "Oh, let me just take this real quick." She'd go into the bedroom, onto the porch, anywhere but near me. When I asked who it was, she'd smile casual. "Just a friend from work." But the worst part, it wasn't just the phone. It was everything. Our conversations felt different, forced, like she wasn't really there anymore. I'd try to talk about the future, our anniversary, plans for a vacation, Even something as simple as what we should cook for dinner. And she'd just nod and say, "Yeah, we'll see." And then change the subject. It was like she had already checked out, like she was already gone. But I wasn't stupid. I knew something was going on, so I started watching. One Wednesday, she told me she was meeting a friend for coffee after work. Normal, right? I happened to be in the area running errands, so I figured I'd surprise her. When I got to the cafe, I expected to see her sitting with a friend, chatting over lattes. She wasn't instead. She was outside, pacing, her phone pressed to her ear. I stayed in my car, listened. "It's almost ready," she was saying. "Starting fresh soon." My stomach dropped. I didn't know exactly what she meant. Not yet, but I knew one thing for certain. She wasn't talking about work. When she got home that night, I asked how coffee with her friend went. "Oh," she said, waving her hand, rolling her eyes. "She just complained about her boyfriend the whole time." I looked at her, and in that moment I knew she was lying. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started putting the pieces together. She was planning something, and I needed to find out what. It wasn't until she brought up finances that everything clicked. It was one evening, out of nowhere, as I was making a sandwich in the kitchen. "Have you thought about organizing the bank stuff?" she asked, scrolling through her phone. I lowered the knife, turned to face her. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, too casual. "Just, getting everything in one place. Bank accounts, passwords, documents. For emergencies." "Why now?" Her smile didn't falter. "It's just smart, isn't it?" Her tone was light, her words practiced. "Too smooth." I nodded. "Yeah, that makes sense." But inside, my mind was racing. Why was she suddenly so interested in our finances? And why did it feel like she had been waiting for the right moment to bring it up? I needed answers. The next day, while she was at work, I checked our joint account. Small withdrawals. Nothing huge. Just little amounts here and there. But they added up. She was moving money. I considered confronting her, but something in my gut told me to wait. So instead, I called a friend. He was a lawyer, someone I trusted. After I explained everything, he sighed. "If you think she's planning something, you need to move first. Protect yourself." So I did. I moved my assets, transferred the house, locked down my accounts, and then I waited, and 2 weeks later, she sat me down on the couch, looked me in the eye, and told me she wanted a divorce. She thought she had everything planned. But what she didn't know, I had already won. Over the next few days, I watched her closely. She carried herself with a strange kind of confidence, like someone who had already decided how the next chapter of their life would go. I could see it in the way she moved around the house, the way she glanced at me when she thought I wasn't looking. She had already checked out. She thought she had me cornered. But I stayed calm. I played along. The divorce papers she sent me on Monday weren't just the standard split. They were an execution. She wanted half of everything, the house, the savings, the investments. She even wanted spousal support, even though she made good money herself. She wasn't leaving me. She was gutting me. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the documents, my fingers tightening around the edges of the paper. My lawyer had warned me this might happen, but seeing it in writing made it real. The woman I had spent 6 years with wasn't just walking away. She was making sure I had nothing left. But what she didn't know was that she was already too late. I had spent the last few weeks making sure of that. When we arrived at mediation, she looked completely at ease, sitting across from me in her expensive blazer, her lawyer beside her, ready to bleed me dry. Her lawyer started going through their demands like it was a done deal, like they expected me to roll over. But then my lawyer slid a folder across the table. "Before we proceed, I think you should take a look at these." Her lawyer frowned but took the documents. I watched as he flipped through them, his expression shifting from confident to confused, then to something closer to panic. "You didn't mention this," he said sharply, turning to her. She grabbed the papers, scanning them, her face draining of color. This can't be right," she muttered, her fingers gripping the edges. "Oh, it's very right," my lawyer said smoothly. "My client transferred all major assets to a trust under his mother's name weeks before your client filed for divorce. Legally binding, uncontestable, everything is accounted for." The silence in the room was thick. She turned to me, her eyes wide with disbelief, then narrowed in fury. "You knew," she accused. I finally spoke, my voice calm. "Of course I knew." She clenched her jaw. I could see the storm behind her eyes, the calculations, the realization that she had lost before she even started. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low, shaking. I leaned back in my chair. "It is for me." Her lawyer cleared his throat, clearly trying to salvage what he could. "We'll need to discuss options moving forward," he muttered. But we all knew there were no options left for them. When we left the office, she pulled me aside in the hallway. Gone was the smooth, confident woman who had walked in earlier. Now she just looked desperate. "We can fix this," she said quickly, her voice softer, almost pleading. "We don't have to do this. I thought we both wanted something different." I stared at her. "You thought I wouldn't see what you were doing," I said quietly. "You thought you could take everything from me and walk away like nothing happened." Her expression flickered. "It wasn't like that. Wasn't it?" She opened her mouth and closed it, and in that moment I saw it. Regret. Not because she loved me, but because she had lost. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there. But she wasn't done yet. Over the next few weeks, she spiraled. First it was the calls. At first they were soft, apologetic. "Please, we just need to talk. I don't want things to end like this. We can work something out." When I ignored them, the tone changed. "You're such an asshole. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? You'll regret this, I swear." I didn't answer. Then she started telling people things. Our mutual friends, colleagues, even my own family members. She spun every version of the story she could. At first, it was that the divorce was mutual. Then when that didn't stick, she told people it was all a misunderstanding. When that failed, she started playing the victim. "He blindsided me. He manipulated me into thinking we were okay. He's cruel, heartless. I didn't even see it coming." Some people believed her at first, but then the truth started slipping through. Matt, an old friend of ours, sent me a text one night. "Thought you should see this." Attached were screenshots of messages between her and another man. Jake. The same Jake who had been liking all her social media posts. The same Jake who, it turned out, had been seeing her behind my back. And the worst part? One of the messages said, "Once the settlement's done, we'll have everything we need." She wasn't just leaving me. She was setting up her future with him. I should have been angry. But at that moment, all I felt was relief, because I was free. When the divorce was finalized, she walked away with nothing. The house was mine. The savings were mine. The investments were mine. She had no claim to anything. Jake, he disappeared the moment he realized she wasn't coming out of this with the money she promised him. Her friends? Most of them walked away, realizing the truth too late. Even her family, once on her side, had started to distance themselves. One night I got a text from her brother. "I had no idea what she was doing to you. I'm sorry I believed her." But by then I didn't care. I had my life back. She had nothing. Now when I look back, I realize something. This wasn't just about the money. It wasn't about the betrayal. It was about the fact that I had trusted someone who never really saw me as her partner. To her, I was just a stepping stone, a means to an end. But she forgot one thing. I wasn't stupid. And when the time came, I didn't let her win. So here's my advice. If something feels off, trust your gut. If they start acting different, if they start hiding things, if they suddenly become obsessed with your finances, pay attention, because some people don't leave you. They try to take you down with them. And when that happens, you'd better be ready. Weeks passed after the divorce was finalized, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the empty, suffocating silence I had once feared. It was peaceful. No more second-guessing every word. No more paranoia every time my phone buzzed. She was gone. One evening, as I was leaving work, my phone vibrated with a notification. An email. From her. I hesitated before opening it. "I lost everything. You know that, right? You set me up to fail. You made sure I walked away with nothing. Was that really necessary?" I stared at the words. waiting for something, guilt, anger, satisfaction. But all I felt was nothing. She had played her hand, and she had lost. I just want to talk. Please, maybe we can figure something out. I deleted the email without replying. A week later, I heard from a mutual friend that she had been evicted from her apartment. Whatever future she had imagined with Jake had crumbled. Turns out, he wasn't interested in a woman who had no money, no assets, no leverage. He had moved on just as quickly as he had arrived. And her, she was back where she started, alone, desperate. She tried reaching out a few more times, but I never answered. Because here's the truth. Some people only want you when they think they can take from you. When they realize you have nothing left to give, they either leave or beg for another chance. But second chances are for people who make mistakes, not for people who make plans to destroy you. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even bitter. I was just done. Looking back, I've learned something. Trust isn't about love. It's about knowing that when everything falls apart, the person beside you isn't the one holding the match. If something feels off, don't ignore it. If they start pulling away, if their words and actions don't line up, don't convince yourself it's nothing. Because some betrayals don't happen in an instant. Some are planned, calculated. And if you're not careful, you won't see it until it's too late. So, what do you think? Have you ever caught someone trying to manipulate you before they succeeded? Would you have handled it the same way I did? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.